Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to be talking about a rather political topic. We're going to be talking about the implications of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Okay, and implications being, you know, political, obviously, but insofar as it is political, it's also transitive from philosophy because that's kind of the holistic framework that we come from as CTMU thinkers or CTMU believers. All right. Um, the political implications of something are likely indications of some kind of metaphysical implication that has influence on the manifestation of moral things or immoral things. So the first thing is that obviously, condolences to Charlie Kirk's family. I mean, obviously, I was not a guy that was a fan of Charlie Kirk insofar as politics is concerned, in as much as I'm not a fan of Ben Shapiro or anybody else that is affiliated with that kind of right wing area. And I've given my reasons for that in my video on the Daily Wire. But it's needless to say that it's actually not equivalent to being righteous. The idea of shooting a political commentator in the neck being a righteous thing to do because you disagree with their political opinions. And I know you've heard this a lot because it's quite an extensive position on the right that, hey, yeah, you shouldn't be allowed to, kill people for their political opinions. But more so, I'm going to focus on the leftist reaction to this, that of, humiliation, ridicule, for Charlie Kirk, for his family. Um, and what makes it worse is that it was a public death. It was very public. It was very, it was very televised, so to say. It was very appropriated throughout the media. And so that does give a abnormal sting to it. And it will suck, and it does suck, and it will suck for a long time, especially for the people that are close to him. But the reactions that are barred out of this situation on the left are completely normal, right? I don't understand why people are so surprised by leftists having a non-visceral reaction to this, but rather that of joy and glee, right? It's almost as though the right wing does not have any intellectually formal association of the left with immorality in their head. It's like, well, how does that make any sense? How does that make any sense as a conservative, as a right winger, somebody that is right leaning? How do you not have an association with that which is left, that which is a left leaning person, with that which is a fundamentally corrupt person in the capacity of morality and ethics? How do you not have that association in your head? It would be completely foolish to not have that association in your head. Why is this some kind of expectation that the left would react normally? Why? Why? Where does this come from? Does this come from an assumption that the left you know, operates based on some kind of vacant source of morality that is only vacant in, political debate. No, no, the political debates are a manifestation of the vacant morality. It's not conversely true, okay? The vacant morality isn't only like presently seen when they're engaging in debates about fucking abortion. I was like, yeah, when I'm talking to a leftist regarding abortion, that's when it seems to me to be the case that they are not actually that all that moral. They don't actually have a coherent and cogent moral system that is actually objective and non-relativistic. That's when. But when I see them out and about in the day, seems like seems like a fucking Christian. No, the association of a leftist and the categorization of any person that is a progressive and left leaning and their philosophy is based on that they're in, or their political philosophy is an extension of some kind of moral system that it must be based on in order for it to intelligibly be possibly true at this end, in some way. It must be relativistic and it must be subjective, it must be atheistic and secularist, and so it cannot be moral. It just cannot be. You cannot think of these people as moral. It's just not possible. Okay, so the expectation that they would react amicably, and I don't know if most people had this expectation, but the reaction of the right to the complete disregard the leftists and progressives and liberals have been having to this situation has been so visceral, as in like it's a gut reaction of disgust. It's like, well, this should be your expectation. You should be used to this. It's happened so many times. It's happened so many times. Why are you still? And I'm telling you why I'm being so critical of the right wing here for, some ankle biting loser. They criticize me for it. It's because this is a call for unification. Okay? This is a call for, we need to stop treating leftists like our political adversaries. And we need to start treating them as what they are, which is non-morality having idiots. Like, when you go to a zoo and you look at a donkey and, or you look at a gorilla and the gorilla's fucking stomping, it's hitting the cage. You're like, well, I'm sure the reason this gorilla is hitting the cage is because he has a disagreement to me. Well, let's have this conversation. Let's further deliberate upon this. Let's extrapolate. Well, why is the reason then you want to hit the cage out of anger? Is it something that I is it something that I said? You know, it's like no, you are talking to like a literal retard. I don't know why you think you're going to converse with this thing. Okay, and so we do need to start treating them as things. And that's not to say we advocate political violence because we obviously don't. Um, but there needs to be a radical change in the way that people treat progressives. And I'm talking about political pundits in particular because this is kind of symbolic. This is kind of a symbolic hit against people of that category. You can very much be next as a right wing political commentator. Why do we have to pretend like it's not good or it's not out of self interest or at least some kind of precautious um, precautious behavior to just treat leftists like the lunatics they are. Stop giving them logical consideration. Stop trying to meet them halfway. They don't have morality. They don't have that. They don't have an intelligible basis for it. They can't have an intelligible basis for it because if you have an intelligible basis for morality, you do not get leftism. You don't get liberalism. You don't get progressivism. You don't get any of this shit. You don't get the idea that you should be allowed to kill babies. You don't get the idea that, you can just switch your gender. You don't get these things because they are not emergent from morality or an objective moral system that is intelligible. So, that's that. What should the pragmatic response be? And should these calls to violence, I want to point something out. A lot of right wingers and conservatives are, let me just mute Discord. A lot of right wingers and conservatives, what they're doing is essentially they're engaging in cancel culture. They're contacting the information, they're contacting people, um, the jobs of people and their higher ups, people that have, you know, ridiculed Charlie Kirk's death and his assassination. And what they're doing is they're trying to get them fired. And they're trying to get them kicked out of university. Now, I understand the urge, of course. I mean, this is just like naturally human. Of course, somebody slaps you, you want to slap them. Somebody punches you, you want to punch them back. But I think people of the right wing need to be symbolic of they need to be representatives of their position. Because if they're not representatives of their position, then who else could possibly be representative of their position? It's sure not going to be leftists, right? A leftist is not going to be representative of the right wing position or the right wing extrapolation of a right wing position they're in. A right winger could only do that. So when you're against cancel culture, you cannot go ahead and engage in cancel culture while being a conservative that says, hey, cancel culture is fucked up. Okay? And I understand the urge, but if you want to see the manifestation of this set of beliefs, okay, in reality, you need to be a manifestation of these certain set of beliefs in reality. Okay? That would be the best way to go about it. Um, and so the whole, contacting people's jobs to get them canceled, I'm trying to figure out, how could I justify this? How could this be like a justification with the position of a right winger, right? Um, I just don't think it is, right? I just don't think it is. Okay. Um, Now, granted, um, I am thinking because I think you could possibly make an argument otherwise. You could sway me otherwise, right? I just don't think it's productive, and I don't think it's good. Um, I don't think it's teleologically consistent either. But I could see how, somebody that advocates for shooting people in the face, let alone just, getting them fired from their fucking jobs for a political opinion, right? I understand how, you know, somebody could think of getting them fired from their job would be a moral thing to do or an okay thing to do. But I don't think if you hold the position that is the case that, you shouldn't be able to do that. That no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, that you should be like an exemplary of doing that. I think that would be a hypocritical thing. Now, we can get back to this, and it's not exactly a major point, but that's them. Another thing that I want to talk about is the shooter. Uh, the shooter and this notion that he's some kind of like a right wing Republican. And this is like bottom of the barrel thinking. Um, so I think it has been demonstrated that this killer has had correspondences with other people. So, so much so that he went back to the site of the crime, or was it the site of the crime and he went to recollect his gun or something like that after conversing with people that could be his accomplices. Now, we don't know the details of this yet, as I don't believe that he's been interrogated or whatever. I don't know. His father turned him in. But I more so want to tackle the notion that this guy, we have reason to believe in some fucking shape, way, or form that politically motivated guy that was a Republican and a conservative was shooting Charlie Kirk. Well, if he was a politically motivated person, he was a Republican and conservative, he wouldn't be shooting Charlie Kirk. He'd be shooting fucking Vosh or Destiny. He wouldn't be shooting Charlie Kirk because that's not the manifestation of a political motivation that you have based on the basis of being a Republican or being a conservative. Okay? Because conservatives aren't usually motivated to shoot conservatives. Republicans aren't usually motivated to shoot other, people that they love. Okay? Especially like a Republican. It's like so fucking stupid. And if you look at the things that this guy had on his rifle, it would seem to be the case that either this rifle isn't his, or that he's not actually a Republican conservative, and the rifle is his, and it would make more sense as to whether the political motivations were instantiated as a result of right wing political influence or left wing political influence, and I think it would be the latter. But yeah, he had things like he had gay stuff. He had, the guy's just a freak. Obviously, it's just anybody that does this is a freak. Okay, I think that's at least presumably true. And another thing that I want to talk about is the ankle biters on the left. The notion that they can have this false sense of a moral camaraderie or moral equivacy with people that are right wingers that are mourning and grieving this death, while simultaneously holding the position that Charlie Kirk a piece of shit. He was a complete extremist, but I don't think he should have been killed. I don't think it's completely fine that he was killed. I was turning to Jordan Peterson there. Pieces of shit like Hassan that are, you know, we know what they are. That are, insofar as influence is concerned. almost definitely um, a tangent, at least, or not tangent. I don't think that would be a good characterization, but in some way relevant to this death or its occurrence. The notion that, yeah, Charlie Kirk was a piece of shit based on what? Based the fuck on what? You know? I see a lot of these ideas regarding gun control. Like, well, Charlie Kirk said that, some gun deaths uh, are a cause of guns existing, and I think that it is worth it that guns exist at the cost of some people dying as a result of guns. Yeah, but that's not actually equivalent to saying that, hey, you should be able to go out and shoot political commentators in the head because by virtue of you being able to have guns. Reap what you sow. It's like, yeah, no, that's actually not how it works, you stupid son of a bitch. That's actually not how it works. That actually doesn't make sense. That's actually not an example of reaping what you sow, because that's not what is being advocated for. The thing that is being advocated for is correct gun use, you know, not unequivocal gun use. Just because Charlie Kirk advocates that people should be able to have guns, or as a general rule, all people should be able to have guns, it doesn't mean that he believes that as a general rule, all people should be able to go out and use the guns to kill people. That's pretty much the entire principle behind the pro-gun argument. So it's not an example of real what you sow, you know. Um, so that's that. And a lot of people make these arguments. People like Hassan saying that he's a piece of shit. It's kind of like a very implicit subtext here. It's very implicit narrative control to say that he's a piece of shit to make the people not as. And I don't. I'll say this: I don't think Hassan is smart enough to um, visualize it in his head this way. But it is an implicit kind of narrative control, at least on his behalf. For some others, it's explicit. It is a kind of narrative control to say, yeah, this kind of person was a piece of shit, but I don't believe that he should have been killed, because it's giving people the notion that they shouldn't be empathetic towards this guy, that they shouldn't feel bad that this guy was killed, that they shouldn't feel as a visceral a reaction as a regular person would to a political commentator getting killed for nothing other than his political commentary, right? It's a normalization. It's an okay. It's like the person that was killed was not a good person. It's like, think of it like this. They see it's equivocating the kind of person that was killed to something akin to a robber or or not a murderer, but a thief or somebody that is just generally societally thought of to be not a good person. Somebody that is a liar, somebody that is a fraud, somebody that is a scammer, somebody that is, you know, a thief or something. It gives the people the same kind of um, ethical, it gives the same kind of ethical purview to a progressive or to even a centrist. Yeah, if we just assume that this person is a piece of shit, then we're not going to feel as bad for him dying. Well, if the person is a piece of shit, then why would we feel bad exactly for him dying? That would be the mental process. And so why would I feel so bad about him dying? That would be the mental process that would be a necessarily consequence of this kind of rhetoric and this implicit kind of narrative control on the behalf of Hassan Piker. Now, granted, I say implicit because I genuinely don't think that a lot of leftists are smart enough to do narrative control. I think they're like very fucking stupid, and so that's the reality of it. Now, I want to also talk about political violence. In what cases are political violence justified? I'll tell you when it is not justified. It is not justified in the case of political commentary. Whoa! What an insane position. What an insane position. The notion that Charlie Kirk held positions regarding Gaza, regarding abortion, which, by the way, he was completely fucking correct on abortions, not Gaza, obviously not. You should be able to kill him, or if he is killed, then it's not an immoral thing just retarded. I think we'll leave it there. It's stupid. I don't think anybody will see it as not stupid. I don't think anybody will see how it is not stupid. And and so that those are a large portion of the qualms that I have with this situation. I'm trying to think back because I'm going off the dome here. I don't have a script or anything. I haven't compiled anything. I'm just thinking about stuff that I've seen um over the past couple of days. Oh, I want to talk about this because it's something that Destiny has talked about. This notion of a condemnation against assassinations of political figures for some fucking reason, conditional upon whether the right wingers um, condemn January 6th. It's like, I'm not going to condemn the assassination of Charlie Kirk unless right wingers condemn January 6th. It's a complete fucking, it's a non sequitur. It's a red herring. It doesn't have anything to do with anything. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to engage in any kind of rhetoric that minimizes the capacity for right wingers to be, or yeah, minimizes the capacity for right wingers to be attacked and like literally violently in a political manner if they don't do the same thing for the left. But um, except the right wingers aren't doing that to the left in the capacity of political commentary. They're not advocate. There hasn't been advocacy for the killing of leftist political commentary so long as there hasn't been murders of leftist political commentators. It just hasn't happened. So it doesn't even make any sense. Um, why would it necessarily conditionally have to be the case that your support for Charlie Kirk and him just not needing to die, or the idea or notion that he should not die, be conditional upon what Republicans have to say about January 6th? This notion that political violence or rhetoric by the right wing is what is leading to political violence is essentially equivalent to two things. Okay? That right wingers cause this kind of behavior, that right wingers cause this kind of political violence against right wingers directly, meaning that the right wing rhetoric itself is equivalent to that kind of rhetoric, which would lead to the murder of a right wing political commentator, which, by the way, is a completely fucking nonsensical idea. So that's ruled out. Or, or that right wing rhetoric leads to the promulgation of a reaction from the left, which is accentuated by this kind of violent undertone, and that leads to violence against the right. But this is again an equivocation between the responsibility on who has the responsibility for this. Again, the burden is shifted to the right wingers for how the left wing people react to their rhetoric. Why? Why does Trump being elected or right wingers or MAGA people not giving a shit about whatever illegal stuff Trump did, disable you from being able to condemn political violence against a political commentator? For what? What reason? Nothing. Other than he just doesn't want to give any kind of validity to the right because he's fucking ass mad. There's quite literally zero logical reason for it. There's no moral reason for it. That's absolutely true. But Destiny doesn't have any kind of morality because he's a completely fucking subjectivist atheist that doesn't have any understanding of morality or philosophy in any capacity whatsoever because he's a fucking illiterate idiot, as all of them are. So I just wanted to dispel the notion of this is what right wing rhetoric leads to. Yeah, actually, right wing rhetoric doesn't lead to right wingers being killed. Yeah, no, it actually doesn't, dumb fuck. That's what left wing rhetoric leads to. Because right wingers don't advocate for killing right wingers. It's only a reaction to right wing rhetoric that can lead to right wingers being killed as a consequence, by proxy, of the reaction of left wingers. And so, is this reaction adequate? Is it, you know, justifiable? Well, you can judge for yourself. Is it justifiable to kill somebody that's not even affiliated with this kind of rhetoric? That isn't advocated for violence? Somebody like Charlie Kirk who hasn't advocated for violence? Somebody because he hasn't condemned Trump, because he hasn't condemned other people in the right wing that might have said something online or made jokes online. Yeah. So that's gonna be it. I think this is um, a crucial point in the timeline of the parasitic divergence. We talk about the parasitic divergence, but this is a parasitic divergence where we have a divergence from humanity. Instead of a converging point of, the human singularity we talk about insofar as CTMU politics or metapolitics is concerned, we have the human singularity as the ideal maxim of human morality and human self-identification and existence as teleologically fulfilled and generalizing that upon the entirety of human civilization, we have the complete and opposite negation of that. And we have a parasitic divergence. And so, in this parasitic divergence, we have people that are completely unjustified in their ethics and morality, or rather, the lack thereof. And so, that leads them to think that everything is okay so long as they agree on it within themselves. If the only rule is that they need to agree on it within themselves, then pretty much anything can fucking go. And granted, they don't even believe that it's absolute. They don't believe that it is objective. They don't believe that it is, non-relativistic. They just go on this arbitrary notion or their arbitrary understanding of the harm principle without any justification for it, right? But they believe that they should be able to harm somebody that, in their view, in their position of morality, in their position of the harm principle, in some way, engages in harm against them because of political commentary, because of their voice, which isn't even, it doesn't even compute with the harm principle, right? um, yeah, doesn't make any sense. So, these people are parasitic. Again, they don't have morality. They don't have an understanding or conception of morality. And so they're limited by that. And also, they're not limited by that. They're not limited insofar as behavior is concerned because that allows them to do anything. And there doesn't need to be an objective justification for it. There just needs to be a relativistic justification for it, for them to be able to do whatever the fuck they want. And so, even within their framework, it would be completely moral to enact violence against. Not that I'm advocating for it. I'm just pointing out that it leads to a contradiction. The fact that even in their system, it would be completely fine to engage in violence against leftists in their system because it is a meaningless system. So, I'm kind of dazed right now. I'm just giving this monologue after having woken up. Um, but um, I just wanted to get this through with. I want to give my thoughts on this once and for all. Um, yeah, I feel very frustrated with what has happened. And I mean to say frustrated not as like some kind of looming sense of sadness, but like more of frustration and anger than, just visceral sadness. I think that might come later. But I think what you should feel is frustration. Because you feel frustrated when, you know, you feel frustrated when justice isn't being enacted, when something inorderly is occurring in reality, something that is not in line with how reality's state of affairs ought to be. And somebody else who has the ability to make it do that, or make it not do that, does that. And so that's where frustration comes from, and I'm frustrated. As a conclusion, I want to send, obviously, My condolences to his family. Um, yeah, it's not a good it's not a good situation. It's fucked up, and yeah, we need to stop treating leftists as though they are like our intellectual equals. They're not. Not at all.